Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Ohio Poetry Association Spring 2023 fundraiser. What the way it works is people from around the state of Ohio have submitted poems to the OPA, and we're going to go down and read them. They've asked us to maybe just read them or discuss them or workshop them or whatever. The point of this is for us to just have fun with it. The panel is Sandra Feen, who is the Beat Poet Laureate of the state of Ohio, Manuel Iris, who's the second Poet Laureate of Cincinnati and is currently the writer in residence of the Cincinnati library system. And there's still was 36, 39 libraries or something. You said something crazy that you're managing. I mean, these are all busy people, so I'm so thankful that they're here. And then, of course, Kari Gunter-Seymour, two-time Poet Laureate of the state of Ohio, among her many other achievements and accolades, as well as the architect of the Cardinal Sings anthology. So I'm very, very lucky to have these people here with us today. I ask if you are in the crowd, you can write down questions or comments, or I'll read your questions out. This is for us to kind of go through the poems as a group of the four of us. So, just try to take that into consideration. We may not get to everyone's poems today, and that's okay. We received over 35 poems from people from all over the state. I don't think there's no way we'll be able to get to that because that's just a few minutes per poem. Oh, thank you, Tom. And yes, please go to Ohio Poetry Association's website and donate. For the next week, I will be pestering you. So thank you for allowing me to pester. These 2 hours of poetry review is meant to make it more palatable and remind you what kind of community we have, what kind of work is done by the OPA. The OPA is filled. I watch these volunteers do crazy stuff all year long, and they bust their butts, and nobody's getting paid for it. And a lot of good comes out of it. So that's kind of where we're at. As we workshop and discuss the work, please note these are just the opinions of 4 people. Our opinions are not, they are not monoliths. I am certainly nowhere even close to the foundation of a monolith. Like there's none of us here are if you listen to something and you're like, oh man, I really wish they wouldn't have taken it that way, or I didn't mean for it to come across that way, or don't take anything we say personally. Just 4 opinions. It's like any other workshop, except for even more informal than a workshop setting. So this is just meant to be for fun. Without further ado, let's get started. So what we're gonna do, our first poem here. This is from Irene T. Winslow, and she wrote, I want to submit the following poem for discussion. It's called World Bee Day. In honor of the honeybee, I will plant poppies by the row, bright colors blooming in the lee, in honor of the honeybee. Put bee hotel in the dogwood tree, blossoms purple and red will grow. In honor of the honeybee, I will plant poppies by the row. We have bee containers that we've been putting up, like nests. They're those little small, they've got little circles in them so the honeybees can get in, and because and we also have like a bee garden in the background, so I was really pleased to see this. So what do we think? Formal, a triolet for our first poem, which I think is fantastic.
I agree. And this is a poem I'd like to read in the morning when I get up to just start my day. I mean, it's so positive and beautiful, very visual. And yeah, I just really, really like it. Thank you for this beautiful poem, Irene.
I love it also. I love the jubilance of it. The tone is just so positive. I also appreciate poems that inject color. And I also appreciate the fact that enjambment is used in this poem. For anybody who doesn't know what enjambment is, that's a continuation or spilling of one thought, one line into another in order to complete a thought. You can see that, for instance, 3 lines from the top, blossom purple and red will grow in honor of the honeybee. That thought couldn't be completed unless those two lines spilled from one into the other, and that helps to gain the momentum and immediacy of the speed of the poem. And so I appreciate that this poet used enjambment as well as color. And again, I love the jubilancy of this poem.
Yeah.
I really appreciate, of course, being a triolet, but the musicality of the poem. This is a poem that is really easy to read out loud. It's a poem to sing. And I also think that it's important nowadays, writing these poems that connect us back to nature. And this poem is not longing for nature that is gone. It's not lamenting something that is not there, but it's celebrating and talking about planting things by the row. So this is also not the nature outside of the cities or far from rows or say civilization in some way. This is that nature that is around us, even when we are not in nature, so to speak. And so it's a poem that pays a lot of attention to what is about the natural environment that is with us, even in those environments that we have taken over.
Yeah.
It is indeed a beautiful poem. I really enjoy this poem.
I would say one more thing, because I am such a fan of the short poem. There's such economy here, and every word, it seems as though the poet has taken great care in choosing every single word that she's placed here. And I appreciate that so much. In this world where we're so inundated and so busy, and to sit down and read a long poem these days feels like a chore instead of something wonderful to do. So I love it when I'm honored with a well-written short poem. So again, thank you. Thank you for this poem.
I agree with you, Kari. And answer, someone had a question of what a triolet is. I'll say this slowly in case you want to write this down. It's a poem of 8 lines, typically of 8 syllables each, rhyming A, B, A, 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 B, A, B. Again, that's A, B, A, 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 B, A, B. And it's structured so that the first line recurs as the 4th and 7th, and the second as the 8th. And it's real easy to find that if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think I got that all down, you can easily look that up. But again, it's 8 lines, typically of 8 syllables each, rhyming A, B, A, 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 B, A, B.
I put up, if you're watching this on YouTube, I put up the structure in the document here. Obviously I'll take that down, but in case you want a visual of what Sandra is saying.
I didn't even see that. Thank you.
No, it's okay. I was doing it as you were explaining it. Yeah, I'm always envious of people who are brave enough to try these forms, because there's like pantoums and stuff where you repeat the entire line. You have to rely, as Manuel said, you have to rely on the sound, and that's not where I feel comfortable as a writer. It's neat. All right, let's move on. Thank you so much, Irene, for your submission. Next we have Bonnie Proudfoot, and Sandra, you're up.
Can you scroll that up a little bit?
Oh, sure. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you. And okay, is the last line a zither? I step away from parts of me. Oops.
When I jostle through boxes is the last line.
I'm all right. Zither. Do you want the zither? My brother asked, and I say yes, because it was Mom's. It hung on the wall in the living room in Queens, with me for my entire childhood. I thought I would try to learn to play, but I could not get past the tuning, about 14 strings from twangy to tingly, toll painted, gold highlights, matte black, harp shaped, small enough to strum on a lap. I once asked for help at a local Athens music store, but no one there had ever played a zither. I can't part with it, but I've placed it deeper into the bedroom closet, deeper even than the clothes that haven't fit for years, just a bit too city, the oversized suitcase I haven't used, and it's like that, waiting with all this possibility. And this makes me think of words like zither or Yiddish words, how few I use these days. I wonder how many zithers are in Athens County. I wonder how many times I have thought but not deployed. Klutz, Shamozel, Bupkis. Is this assimilation? I make music without a zither. I step away from parts of me, but they are still here. I am always trying to figure out what to hold on to. When I jostle through boxes, no one hears the zither play but me. I want to apologize if I feel like I did not read this as well as I could have. I feel really emotional and I have chills as I'm reading this because I have my mother's zither and I've been working to try to find a place to get it repaired. And I just cannot believe how synchronistic this is. Oh my goodness. What a beautiful poem. And it really, not to sound cliche-ish and cheesy, but it really pulls at my heartstrings. Oh my goodness. Oh, this really connects to me and it's beautiful. Thank you.
I Googled a zither. I wanted to see images of it. So these are the first images that came up.
Oh, oh gosh.
Yeah, okay. This whole section here, I'm a big fan of packing in adjectives, especially hyphenated compound phrases like this. It's a part. I think it's a neat way to speed up the read when you're reading out loud. I'll do it intentionally if I know that I want to build before a moment. Like I've written a line and I know the line is got some impact, but it needs a crescendo of sorts. This is what I'll do on purpose. I wanted to point this out. The poem is great, but this is probably my favorite part in terms of because it builds, and then it's just small enough to strum on a lap, which is the opposite of how I would use it, but it's still cool.
I love how she draws the reader in immediately with that first line too. Do you want the zither? That's just beautiful.
It's hard to open on a question. It's fun if the question's good, but it's a good one.
Yeah, it really works here.
So Bonnie wanted some feedback. So the question is, what feedback do we have for her? I think my first would be to add stanzas. I think that's where I would go with it. You don't think so?
I'm shaking my head. Yeah, I am loving what's happening with poetry nowadays. This sort of energy by not having stanzas and making the reader build and build and build and build. And I think particularly with this poem, it's very successful because she is educating us so completely. Like you, Jeremy, I honestly did. I mean, I pick up that it must be a musical instrument, but I know nothing about it. And by the time I finish the poem, I feel like I know quite a bit about it, and I love that. And I think it builds and builds, from that beginning question. And we get to see how the poet's mind wanders through all of this, how she's dealing with her emotions. And Sandra, it was really cool that you shared what you experienced, because obviously the writer, which we happen to know is Bonnie, wonderful Bonnie, has shared her emotions through this too, but in a non-modeling way. You know, she's not being overly sensitive about it, but we feel that, you know, she's put it so far back in the closet that it's behind, you know, the clothes she doesn't wear anymore because they're just not quite right. But she can't get rid of them, you know, and the suitcases, which go in front of those things, you know, so she's got it pretty deep in there. However, it keeps calling to her. And I love that, because that's what happens, right? And especially when someone passes. And I think that's what the root of this gets to. This is about, because her brother's saying, do you want this? Because it was her mom's. And it hung on their wall, her childhood wall. And this is a family heirloom. And it's almost like, okay, who's in charge of the heirloom now? Because the brother has pretty much said he doesn't want it. Or he wants to bestow it or pass it on. Or maybe they're, you know, for all I know, they're at the apartment cleaning things out. I don't know, but it's an important thing, this heirloom. And she's kicking this all around, you know, and including, I agree, Tom's saying something about the Hebrew. It's wonderful, you know, that she's using these words. I just feel incredibly educated by this poem. And I personally, and Jeremy, that's no disrespect to you, you might be right. The whole world might wish for stanzas here, but I am enjoying the way it's been presented. And my only feedback to anyone is to go back through and see what you can get rid of. What can you absolutely live without? And it might be just an and or a the or an it, or it might be one tiny couple of words, something like that, just to tighten it a tiny bit more. But this is a pretty darn good poem.
Jeremy, I often think along those lines, you know, to try to take organize language chunks in terms of stanzas. But in this case, this was my first reaction, that, oh my goodness, this is maybe perhaps a found poem, because this kind of looks like the shape of a zither. So I was wondering if that was what Bonnie was doing. In addition to, as she was going on this journey of this emotional journey with this zither, she's getting even deeply embedded into this instrument. So I really kind of saw this as kind of a single stanza and a found poem look, and it was looking like the shape of a zither. So in this case, I would say, as you're saying, Kari, keep it this way.
Please give me pushback. I mean, I'm very happy to hear that.
Well, and that's because of this just so deeply resonates with me, because I've got this zither and I've got it in the back of my closet, and I'm trying to find where I can get it fixed because I want to play it and yada yada.
One thing I was thinking of, and I guess this is where I was at, was I wanted to take this line, is this assimilation?
Yeah.
And I wanted to move this to after this build here. So, you know, small enough to strum on a lap, is this assimilation? So that way, that reflection, so you have this question bookending the beginning, and then you have this build, and the build, like, I love this build, and it gets to this small moment, small enough to strum on a lap. Like it's literally and figuratively reflective of itself. And then have the philosophical question here. And so then you got like the beginning kind of bookended. And I was thinking, okay, well then you put a stanza here, and then you have these like big pieces. And then you put the second one in where the wondering begins. It felt like a natural place to put those things. So that's where my head was at. But I like ordering things. So I tend to impose structures sometimes where it's not wanted or doesn't belong.
Oh, I think it's smart to put that question, is this assimilation, there. I think that makes sense.
You could also do that without adding stanzas. Like you don't have to add stanzas to move that piece.
I think that's smart reasoning.
I think, well, first, this is a very beautiful poem. And I think that part of the poem's strength is going from always talking about the zither, but talking about, you know, the family heirloom, the Jewish heritage, questioning yourself, like, am I assimilating? How many of these words I'm not using? Because this is a zither that the speaker of the poem confessed not to know how to play. So there are many things that are being left behind. You know, here is a zither. It, in my hands, is not a musical instrument anymore because I don't know how to play it. There are these words in Hebrew that I use less often, and like these things are being left behind, and I have to question myself if I am assimilating what is happening. This is a very, very interesting poem, and it is so packed with so many subjects, and each one of these subjects is so deep that I wonder if this poem is the beginning of a poetry collection, because around this heritage and around the idea of the zither, and using the zither as a metaphor that goes beyond one poem, this poem could very well be the beginning of a collection. I don't know how long, or at least of a series of poems, because there is so much material here. You know, it's music, but it's music that is now in the memory. So it is not only the personal memory, but also the memory of that people, you know. And I don't know, I think it's a very rich poem that mentions many possibilities, but does not exhaust them. And it doesn't have to, because all of those possibilities can be explored in subsequent poems. I really like this poem. As it is, I wouldn't move much of this poem as a prelude of a collection of poems, or at least a series of poems.
That's such poignant comments. And perhaps the collection could be called I Make Music Without a Zither, which is one of her lines in this poem.
Yeah, that would be cool. I could see it like she's like unpacking boxes, and as she unpacks each one, it's like another poem and another like fresh set of memories. It's yeah. I think it's hard when you read a collection of that's about one person and seeing what they chose to highlight. Like if you write about the ending of someone's life, that's something I struggled with recently. Was I had all these negative poems. I was like, I can't do this. I gotta do positivity in here too. I gotta celebrate their life, not just, you know. So I think I think all of you are 100% correct. And Manuel, I never thought about it that way, that there's so many facets to family and so many facets to it's pretty cool. I wish I had the three of you to read poems with more often. Does anybody have any other comments for Bonnie before we move on? I was thinking about like what Kari said. I think you could cut this bit. Like, do you want the zither? And I think you could just say, I say yes because it was mom's. And I think like that would be a great 1-2 line. I think there's some word economy stuff you could do in here, but it's already pretty dense. So maybe I don't know. Any other comments, questions?
I agree with you about taking out that beginning of that second line.
Yeah, the only feedback that I would give is to if I would like to highlight in the poem the several possible other poems that are in it. Like childhood is one poem. The relationship with my mother, the relationship with music, the sitar, how did the sitar got to the home, how that instrument got to the family. You know, when did we decide to put this sitar on the wall and not to keep it, you know, to play? When did that sitar went to the closet? When was the last time that this was played as an instrument in our family, and making connections with the larger Jewish tradition? Like there are so many possibilities that are mentioned in this poem that could later on be explored. So I would, because I want to know more. Kari said, I also feel very educated by the poem, but I feel intrigued by the family history. I want to know how this sitar came in, who got the sitar first. Is this inheritance from a lineage of women in the family? How does this sitar travel around, across the ocean to get here? How this sitar got to Athens County? Like all of this, like the story of this particular object is the story of a family, you know?
Yeah.
Just like the red violin tone. Yes.
Just like the red violin. Okay, that was Tom. Thank you, Tom. All right. Yeah, cool. Great. Good stuff. I'm going to move on. This is Chad Lowther. He is he's a writer from Cleveland. And his Kari, you are up.
Okay. Out of silence, where the ether of myth fills perception with a feeling nearer to apprehension, a vague and troubling stirring stirs the quietude within and fills the imagination with a symphony of latent mumbling, of reason licking lustfully after a dignifying expression of sweetness beyond reach, the intimate effort to embrace a desire, alighted at this altar of cognition to discern concepts that settle like dust over the experience of intuition. A curious force with which to determinate the tedium of melancholy, earnestly seeking a resting place, scratching at a continuous expression, and it is accepted that these figures are unmoving.
So Chad was seeking a workshop of this poem. I'm going to throw some MFA speak out there. Not really MFA speak, but one of the things that I studied surrealism, and one of the things that we had a person come in and do a talk, and one of the things I learned was that it's really helpful to have, because I like there's a richness to the language here. It moves, and but I think what I'm looking for is something to ground it. And one of the things that I thought was always really useful with poetry that is more non-specific was to have either a really grounded title, or to have a specific object the poem is about, of like a detailed, a ground. It's a lightning rod, so that way the rest of the poem can operate around that, that idea. I'm kind of struggling to grab onto something specific here. And I think you could do, out of silence, the mailman angrily chucks the newspaper at my door. And it doesn't, it could be something like that. It could be any of these moments here, like after, lustfully after a dignifying expression of sweetness beyond reach. What is being reached for? It is something that is specified, so the rest of the poem we can create the constellation ourselves.
I agree. Or if perhaps this were an ekphrasis poem, you know, you could say after Edward Hopper's and then name the title of the painting, or use an epigraph maybe to ground it. But we do maybe need something concrete here. There is some beautiful language here. I like, I mean, I think, you know, the first line where the ether of myth fills perception, even though I can't exactly grasp that. It is lovely language, but I do agree with you that we need something to ground it.
There could even be like specific images, right? Like if to discern concepts that settle like dust. What if the concepts was, instead of being vague, was specific? You know, to discern when the traffic light's going to turn red before, you know, I don't know, something, or to discern the meaning of life or the duality of man, or I don't know, so something, so that way, even if we don't know what the poem's about, the specificity of the language keeps us there, because that works too, I think.
I have a thought about, I think a different title could maybe help this poem work harder. And the first line, where the ether of myth fills perception, I think you could really build on this idea of myth, because the whole poem is kind of a myth in the way it's there's a lot of music in this poem with the language. We've talked a little bit about that, and I think expanding on myth might be another direction to take on helping to ground the poem, I guess is what I'm getting at. And there's all this beautiful language, but every now and then there's this really hard word thrown in, like the word quietude. Even the word dignifying is kind of hard, coming after symphony of latent mumbling, of reason licking lustfully after a dignifying. It's one of those times where maybe you need another word there. And you're talking about desire. You know, you could build on that a bit more. Myth and desire kind of go together. Discern is another word. Maybe that's a little bit too hard to be in this poem. Like, we want something softer, something that goes back to this ether of myth, because this is where you started me. So I want to stay in this ether for a while. I want to know what's going on in here. And I think it's almost here. And again, it might be another situation in which you could remove a few things to tighten it up a bit and expand a little bit on just a couple of things to really make this poem sing. But I'm not sure that Out of Silence is a big enough title for what you really want from this poem, I don't think. Just a suggestion, again, just a suggestion or two.
All right. Any other thoughts for Chad before we move? Manuel,
Yeah,
I see you turn
yeah.
it over.
I don't know, because of the way I work, I don't know if the way to help build this poem, or the way I can help build this poem, is talking about what is written there, about you know, the poem itself. But I would like the author, you know, Chad, to spend more time in the silence before the writing of the poem, or even in the silence after writing the poem, asking, what is this poem trying to say? What is this poem trying to say? What is this music trying to allude to? And then try to take out everything that is in the way of this poem saying what it needs to say. I think that many words of this poem are very shiny objects that really distract from a central meaning that has to be there in the poem. This is a poem, for what I read right now, that is in several verses trying too hard to be a poem. Like there is an idea there, and I value the exploration that is there. But I think that many words of the poem are getting in the way of the poem itself.
May I say just one more thing?
Yeah.
Manuel, you said earlier something about in the last poem that there could be perhaps many poems within that poem, and I think that's the case here. Line 2, for instance, with a feeling near to apprehension. I used to tell my students all the time to unpeel the poem or a line to an even deeper level. And I think that this line, for instance, there's a poem contained in that line in itself. With a feeling near to apprehension, I would ask my student, well, whatever you find is as a great case of apprehension for you might be different for me. What causes apprehension for you? Show that to me. What does apprehension look like? So I would ask this wonderful poet to try to just show this line in itself, because I think there's a poem encased in this line right here. What and that could be even maybe perhaps the title of the poem, with a feeling near to apprehension, and show a great moment of apprehension. There could be several poems, several countries of poems within this poem itself, and that is my challenge to this poet, to look for that within these lines.
Well, great. That's awesome. And Bonnie pointed out in the comments, she had said up until the last line of the poem, it seemed to her like the Out of Silence was a poem about how poems come into being. So she suggested that perhaps it was about like the birth of a poem, and this is, I didn't pick that up. I wasn't sure. Like by the time I got to the end of the poem, I read it a couple times, and just to clarify for people who don't know, we're seeing all these poems for the first time as we're scrolling down. I didn't read them; nobody else has read them, so we're just doing this in real time. But I didn't settle on anything like that, and I thought it was clever by Bonnie. All right. Any other comments?
Just to reiterate, if Out of Silence were part of the structure of the poem itself, and the title said the evolution of a poem, then we definitely would have understand that this writer, this poet, was trying to write about how a poem evolves or becomes a being. And so again, the title could work very hard for this poem, if indeed that's what they're going for, or whatever they're going for. I think we need more clues right at the top.
Yeah.
And like Sandra says, always, that's so good you brought that up, Sandra, for all of us to remember, show, don't tell. You know, don't tell us, show us, let us see it, let us feel it, let us smell it, let us taste it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you, Chad. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jennifer Kern, would like this read and discussed. Manuel? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Grandmother Hummingbird. Unknotting, untangling jumbled mess. I am in need. These strands for yarn, older, worn out. My grandmother's fingers used to separate younger, vibrant yarns. Unravel with speed, her fingers flutter like hummingbird wings. I want to crochet the love I am desperate for, just like she did. To cover myself with unconditional, gentle warmth, just like she used to. How her lovely hands were, not lovely as in pretty, but lovely working hands, sturdy, never disappointing, masculine-like, inherited from old country ancestors. I still dream of her, thick fingers fluttering in my sleep, creating love-filled blankets that once soothed my chaos as a child. She held on long enough to cover both me and my newborn son with her Afghan love. His tiny blanket had light blue hearts, and my forlorn scarlet heart remains broken, missing Grandmother Hummingbird. It's a beautiful poem.
This is a great poem.
This is a gorgeous poem. Yeah, and we are to just discuss the poem, right?
Yeah, this is just discussion. We're not workshopping this one. I like how the emphasis that's put on lovely, that she took time to stop it in the middle and be like, no, I don't mean like pretty. I mean like she used them. It's such a great change of focus, but it's also so reinforcing because, you know, she mentions being worn out, and but she's asking for the strength. She's asking for the strength of those hands at the beginning, and this, it's right in the center of the poem, and it pivots really nicely, and it really reinforces everything up to that point, and then locks you in for the rest of the ride. I think this middle part is wonderful.
That line, I mean, I'm just like catching my breath here. That line, I want to crochet the love I'm desperate for, absolutely slays me.
Yes, that line, yes. Me too.
That's like,
I like many things of this poem. I like
I do.
how it talks about a tradition of women too. There is a lineage, you know, and it's also, there is a family heirloom here. We see like Bonnie's poem, like there is this inherited object that has all of this meaning, and it's filled, you know, in this case it was this object created with those hands, these lovely hands. And when the 3 generations are there, which she says, well, this was enough to warm me and my newborn, you know. And we have the grandmother, you know, the one talking in the poem, and then the other generation. This is, I think, is a very rich poem, and I like the calm, the quietness of the poem, the way that is even having the pairs of verses, and the slow pace of each verse, and the very few images, and the recurring hummingbird, and it's a poem that stops to pay attention to specific things. You know, those hands, we all imagine those hands, and we understand the beauty of those hands, It's soothed my chaos as a child, soothing chaos. It's I think this is a beautiful, beautiful poem. It's a love poem.
It reminds me a bit of Brecht's Mother Courage and her children, not in the dragging a wagon across war-torn Europe, but the character, the grandmother, the patience and the steadfastness that you guys were talking about, and the words "old country." I'm not saying they're not needed. I actually really like that part. But by the time you get there, you already kind of feel the old country, like it's all coming out. And so this sort of really reliable woman who just keeps going regardless of the hardship is kind of where I land with it. When they say, like, I always want my kids to have better than I did, I feel like this person did. You know what I mean?
Don't say that.
All right. Any other comments for Jennifer?
I agree with everything that's been said. And one thing that really popped out to me are the words "never disappointing." Have I don't know that I've ever had anyone that never disappointed me, and I think that's a very important part of this poem, obviously. And sometimes we throw words in and don't even realize how powerful they are. And that's kind of why I wanted to pull that out. To say someone has never disappointed you is probably the highest compliment you could ever bestow. And she's already given so many, but that one in particular was like, wow, really never disappointed. And I know we're not workshopping this poem, but I would really urge this poet to go through. I found several things that I think the poem could live without and tighten it up. And because it is just such a gorgeous poem. And as I think it was Manuel that said it, this is a love poem and just so beautifully done.
I couldn't get over the use of the word thick. I thought that was just a perfect example how every word was so conscientiously chosen. Thick fingers fluttering in my sleep. You don't think, when you think of the word fluttering, normally you think of something so petite or light, but it's thick fingers fluttering. Oh, I'm so jealous that I didn't think of that. so beautiful, so beautiful. And I so agree with what all of you said, and I just so thank you for all your comments.
Okay. Thank you very much for sending this in, Jennifer. All right. Our next one is by Tom Barlow to read and discuss The Pilot. A sheepdog shepherds its flock because it can do nothing less, like my mother Evie speaking with the principal again. Me sitting there, 10 years old, face of Jean Valjean. I'm tiptoeing along the conversation looking for a way to slide out of her disappointment, which smokes. The air like the flare dropped to mark where the body drowned. Am I wicked? She does not ask. Look at what I do. I don't say, for I am not wicked. I am flying the Enola Gay. I do what must be done, and who says grade school is not a war zone? Why must I wait until I'm 20 to show my teeth? I admit I wandered from the flock today to confront a pencil thief. Aren't you proud of me? Then her hard hand is dragging mine as we leave the court-martial, a scapegoat again, sent to my room. It seems this world has no place for heroes.
Horrible.
This seems like an actor. I think I pronounced it wrong. Did I pronounce this wrong?
Jean Valjean. Yeah.
Jean Valjean. I think he said Jean Valjean. I always like the sort of like flippant over exaggerations in a speaker's voice, like I'm flying the Enola Gay, and he's, you know, he's obviously not. And that kind of silliness works with me. I don't know. I appreciate the humor of it too. It reminds me, this just reminds me, it seems the world has no place for heroes. I think of my kids doing something and then trying to explain after the fact why they thought it was a good idea. And like, I don't want to be mad at them unless it was malicious, which it usually isn't. But, you know, sometimes it's just like, why would you think that sticking the fork in the wall would make it work better? You know, like that type of stuff. How do you guys feel about the questions here? Because there's a lot of questions in this, like from the "Am I wicked" to "Aren't you proud of me?" I don't know how I feel about them yet, but it's. I think it caught my attention more than the rest of the poem did in the first read through.
I agree. I think the questions take the reader out of the poem just a tiny bit, but it's such a humorous poem in some ways, and it's heartbreaking in others. Because we have a very young person who's very serious about life, but is willing to put it forth in a humorous way. And there's just some beautiful visuals here. I'm tiptoeing along the conversation, looking for a way to slide out of her disappointment. How beautiful is that? The air like the flare drop to mark where a body drowned. I mean, this is a kid who's had some serious movie watching or reading, you know, and he's, you know, you see him as I don't know, a young Indiana Jones or something, you know. He's got a huge imagination. Why must I wait until I'm 20 to show my teeth? I just love that so much. And so I think coming back around to those questions are him, this adventurer, this young man who's obviously very bright and sees the world through an imagination of lenses, asking these questions. Aren't you proud of me? You know, he's trying so hard. And I think I accept them now that I've read through the poem and understand what the writer's trying to do. Look at what I do. You know, look at what I do. I don't say, for I am not wicked. And just the way that language is formed is like it came out of a book, right? Instead of a kid's mouth. I'm flying the Enola Gay. I mean, first of all, that puts us in a time, right? It gives us a time frame of when this young person may have been operating or not, because this is a reader. This is a young person who is well read, obviously, whether it's comic books or history books or but I love the imagination that comes out here of this, the character of this person who's been put forth in this poem. And I'm having trouble finding any words that I could really live without. I think that I think it's very succinct, and I think a good job has been done with all of that. And I realize we're not really workshopping, but I always like to mention that. And I think there's a lot of show, don't tell here, a whole lot.
Well, it reminds me of Calvin and Hobbes. Just suddenly, like he's eating breakfast or something, and now he's flying a spaceship through the cosmos. It's that immediately, like it transports me right away. It's cool. All right. Any other comments for Tom before we move on?
Yeah,
I think he does a great job of deftly and very seemingly effortlessly taking us through the personality, the layers of personality of this great kid. He just does a fine job of navigating through this wonderful personality, and I know that this is hard to do as a writer, but he navigates this so successfully, and I really love it.
Well, I don't know. For me, it's, you know, when Jeremy, you said that it reminds you of Calvin and Hobbes. Like, evidently there is a very young person with this very vast intelligence speaking in the poem. But in order to read this poem with the voice of a kid, certain moments of the poem took me out of the verisimilitude of that character. You know, the reference to Jean Valjean is a great reference, but I don't know if I hear it in the voice of a kid. I don't know how well on how pop culture is the Enola Gay, how many kids would know the name of that plane. And I'm asking this because I didn't grow up in the United States, so I that was not part of my pop culture, you know.
Yeah.
Saying maybe I am piloting the plane that dropped the atomic bomb, but to mention specifically the name of the airplane, I don't know. Sometimes it took me out of the character. Like, I don't see a kid giving those specific references to Victor Hugo or to that specific plane. I don't know.
I see your point, Manuel, but I guess what I did, Manuel, I thought this is a reflection back on a life.
Yes.
And so
Hmm.
the writer is reflecting back on his youth and having these thoughts.
Not talking as a kid.
Yeah, not talking as a kid, but remembering. And that's the way I took it and the way I read it. I don't know if that was the intention, but I did. So that, again, I mentioned earlier, by mentioning the Enola Gay and some of the other things in this poem, it sets up a time frame. And so we know this person was young quite a while ago.
You're right.
Quite a while ago.
Me sitting there. I read it as me sitting here.
I gotcha. And again, I'm not saying
there.
that. I'm not saying that's not what this writer intended. I am saying I approached this poem, and what happened to me was I thought it was the poet reflecting. So I think what you and I are saying is this could be read very differently by different readers.
Yeah, no. I think I misread the there by here. I read me sitting here, 10 years old. No, but it's me sitting there, and that there is there in time.
Right.
Yeah.
On that time.
Yep.
Yes.
I further derailed you with the Calvin and Hobbes. That's my fault.
But it also speaks that it's universal, even based on its time, line, that we could see any young kid, a feisty young boy being just as adventurous, right? But there would be different words there if this were, had been something that had happened instead of in the 50s, maybe in the 70s or 80s or 90s. You know what I'm saying? But you can still relate to this young man who is just full of vinegar and, a huge, wonderful imagination.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for sending this in. I always love reading his work. It's good stuff. This next one is from Anne Hirschberg. I sent you a poem just to be read, not discussed or workshopped, and not published. Sandra, you are up.
Obligations I'm living in, minding an older lady, not a paying job, just board and room. She needs maintenance and repair every now and then by several docks, counting pills for night and day, making food and feeding, keeping her and her house tidy, fetching the paper, books, and mail. Sure takes up time, and she still writes letters. I work in PO trips with other chores. Makes you think how long she's got. That goes for myself too. I see me in her. I see me in her. She is me.
Thank you so much, Anne. Okay, so Ruchi Chopra sent this one in. This is a structurally different poem, and then there are 3 clarifications at the bottom, sort of end note style. So, and they requested, Ruchi requested that we workshop this. So, Kari, do you want me to read this, or do you want to go
Yeah, I really do, Jeremy, because I suffered. So it might not be fair for me to read this one.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm gonna mess up the pronunciations. So I'll do my best. So people, if people are listening to this instead of watching it, there's there are bits of text followed by postcards, and the postcards have a special sort of formatting called "I am just a souvenir." Store-bought magnet mimics a nebula stick on a vintage refrigerator. 80s camper van's windshield laden with grit and gravel, earmarked with much ado and gust as it roams from one city to another in a faraway continent. Postcard from the homeland, ornamental baggage, Yanagi Gori, kept at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit, number 1785. A souvenir to remember the cobble path pavement and plastic check tags for the baggage. In souvenirs, I search for my identity surrounded by magnanimous arches posing for a quick snapshot. Postcard from the homeland, plastic check tags kept at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit, number 1786. Our tourist guide at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit in her 70s, her face laden with lavender, candelilla, and malachite powder, we listen to stories and learn tourist-friendly words. Postcard from the homeland, a coal container kept at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit, number 1787. I remembered my front lawn, not mowed for weeks, and hopscotch on the driveway, snubbed bubblegum web strands on a yellow buckeye. The autumn wind filled with 24 grains of sand. Postcard from the homeland, wooden Nataraja sculpture kept at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit, number 1788. Fragments sundered and kept in 2 separate museums, shrouded by a silk scarf, a gift from my great-grandma. Beneath all these layers, fragments, grit and gravel, dust and grime, sand and oil. I am just a souvenir. Postcard from the homeland, hand-embroidered, Zardozi's silk scarf, kept at the city's Metropolitan Exhibit, number 1789. So it's a lot. So, and the structure, I like departures from traditional structure. I like stuff that's weird like this. There's an engineer in at school where he would write poems based on the forms that they had to fill out, like expense reports and hazmat, like safety forms and that. And he took documentation and made it into poetry.
I'm just going to come right out and say it. The fact that I didn't even want to try to read this poem says something about the structure, though. And I think if we're going to help this person and they want workshop feedback, I think I need to say that from the get-go. And one thing that might help, to me anyway, is if the postcard came first and then the experience. So that might help me. I just think that the lines I just don't think that's working. If it's a postcard, let's make it into a rectangle, or um, I'm just thinking off the cuff here, but if all of this were shaped like a postcard, or you know, I think we can help this poet out by suggesting what form this could take and make it more successful and easier to read and easier to get into and approach. And then I'm a little bit taken back by the title, because the way it's presented in sentence case, it makes me feel like it's the first line of the poem. And so that doesn't make sense to me. And maybe maybe it's just the old-fashioned me struggling with all of this. But I really think there's a lot of good stuff here that can be put to really great use. I mean, I think this can be successful. I just think, to me, this form is not working. And I think, I know Manuel does form poems, Sandra, I don't know if you do, but maybe you have things to offer this poet that could make it work. And all of this said, maybe the two of you love it and you think it's perfect the way it is. So I shouldn't be so firm in my assessment, but that's how it is for me. But I do love some of the things that you're telling me, you know, this vintage refrigerator 80s camper van windshield laden with grit and gravel, earmarked with much ado and gust as it roams from one city to another in a faraway continent. Man, I am so there with that, you know. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Saying, Kari, and I really am in agreement. I've got to admit, I just became so stuck on the title, I'm just a souvenir. To me, that seems to have such a negative connotation. I am just a souvenir. This poem embodies that the souvenir is everything, that it holds memories, it holds details that are important, that ignite emotions that we want to hold on to, details that are important, you know, just everything that matters. I really think that the title isn't enough. It doesn't do all the images that you just highlighted, Kari. I don't think I'm just a souvenir holds justice to the rest of this poem, and I do think that the shape of this is a bit daunting and needs to be reworked as well.
I might suggest, because I do think it might, I liked Kari's idea to move the postcards above the text, but I would also like these cut down a little bit. I don't think you need like the exhibit number and where it was kept. I think you could take that out. And because I think what it is for me, in this case at least, is that I want it to add to the text that it's paired with somehow. And it doesn't always feel like it is. And perhaps like if the postcards are kind of intimating a trip that's happening, perhaps there could be something that the speaker is going along with. Maybe they're not on the trip in the text. Maybe this is about their life. But I wanted to parallel the trip somehow in a more obvious way. That's my like broad comment about this. I don't know, but I agree with you what both of you have said, definitely.
The way I read this poem was not as one single poem. I think that it could be, imagine an ekphrastic book where you have an image and then something that comes, a poem that is written about that image. I think that I Am Just a Souvenir could be a title for a series, and each one of the postcards should be, as Kari said, first the postcard, and then the text after the postcard, and then the next postcard is in a separate page. Each one of these postcards is its own motive for the later poem. I mean, it's I'm Just a Souvenir. That's the title, and then in one page we have postcard, and then the text. In the next page we have postcard and the next text. I think that those dotted lines were trying precisely to be the break between one thing and the other. They are. I don't think that is one poem. This is a sequence of postcards and poems that were all put into one page, and those dotted lines became very confusing. But if we see it as a collection, maybe we will understand more. It was very difficult. It was when I looked at the page, I took a step back, almost asking what is this? I thought that they were several versions of the same poem. Like there are these different drafts, and we were going to discuss different drafts. So I am reading each one of these fragments independently. Maybe that would be. I read these poems as if I was walking through an art gallery. Like it's one, and then you go to the next postcard, and then you go to the next postcard, and then you go to the next postcard. So it has some cohesion, but we will have to work more in order to make clear what are we trying to say.
If these are real postcards, she could even scan and put the postcards up with
that would be perfect. That would be, if they are real postcards, if there is an image, what I imagine is a book that is like that. There is the postcard, and then maybe a caption describing the postcard, and then that is one page. Then we flip the page, and then we see the other postcard and all of that.
Debbie did mention that there could be copyright issues with that. So
yeah, I don't see that being a successful poem to stick visuals in between everything myself. Not that it was a terrible idea. Please don't take me wrong. I think we need to help this poet understand how to make a written poem and not rely so much on image. Even when we do ekphrastic, we all urge ourselves and each other to have a poem that can be read without the image. The image is a trigger, a starting point, but the poem itself needs to be strong enough to be its own poem. And I will say too, we rarely get the opportunity to show the image we use for our ekphrastic work. I can't even say it today. Ekphrastic work, because journals don't want them; they want the poems. So again, I think this person wants to do something with form. I think Manuel's idea of, or maybe it was Jeremy's, to just say postcard from the homeland, a cold container kept at the city's metropolitan exhibit might be plenty, because it stops us again in this poem to wonder, what is number 1787? Is that the date of this postcard, or is it the number from the catalog? So I question all of this, and it slows me down from reading the rest of the poem. And I would really urge this person to think about line breaks, because there's not an editor in the world that's going to take this poem, because it's going to be almost impossible to get it into a book. If you think about the page being 6 by 9, so that makes it like at the most a 5 by 7 window to put a piece in, to flow a piece into. So we all need to think about that too as we write our poems and try to spread them clear across, a page. So I hope that's helpful for this poet, because there's so much wonderful stuff here that if it can be organized, it's just going to be wonderful.
I agree. The writing is fantastic. And
Yeah.
the structure is such a bold choice. It's hard to discuss anything else, because then it's like, well, what is it doing for me?
Right. And I do applaud, though. I applaud this person for this experimentation. And I mean, who knows? I mean, they might be onto something here, and we're just all crazy. But I just don't think it's working as hard as it could to make it as beautiful as I think it can be. I think this can just be incredible, but it has to invite me in to read it. And at this point it is not, and I don't want to beat a dead dog. But there's a lot of gorgeous stuff to work with here. It's an organizational thing at this point.
I think this could be possibly a poem of place. If it sounds like this person, really appreciates the value of postcards, and often postcards, there are, a number of postcards that are found like at a flea market, and you can, for instance, just example, there's a Springfield flea market. So let's say this person attends a Springfield flea market, then sorry, the car just went by in case you heard that. Postcards at July's Springfield flea market as a title, and then there's the place, and flipping through the bin or whatever, and then you're just kind of like then trying to show which ones set your heart on fire and which ones don't. What are you picking out of that bin that really ignite memory, and which ones don't? That's kind of the thing, maybe to think about, that resonate with you, the speaker. And then try to make this more of a, we get the images from each postcard, and then the place from where you're getting these postcards, and then you can somehow try to include these dates, which could very well be the postal stamp that's on the postcard, or maybe it is the actual date on the postcard, and you can find a way as the poet to include that as an image. But I do also, as all of you are saying, applaud the writer for trying this interesting form.
Thank you very much for setting this, Ruchi. It's neat to see this, and like everybody, like the comments, people are interested in it. It's a cool thing. It's tough to go out on a limb like this, I think, and have it work for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And and our comments are always going to be, we're involved with publishing a lot, and we know what gets published, and I think that's part of where a lot of it comes from too. So, okay, this one is from Debbie Allen. She had said to either discuss or workshop this. What Wonder Wants. So Kari, it is now your turn.
Thank you, Jeremy. What Wonder Wants. I know I didn't dream about a fox in tails sauntering a sidewalk near the country club greens, blaze orange breeches shaming the sun, non-monocled orb askance, top hat askew, one forepaw gloved, twirling his gent's stick hip high, the other plunged. I'm sorry, I don't even know what that word is. Napoleonically, there we go, Napoleonically into bib white chest hairs. Or did I? No, I know I didn't. I'd rubbed my eyes ready and turned round in the yellow cab to look again. Napoleonically. Wow.
The danger of having to read these at the time, not have any prep.
Yep. And so I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. I've already messed up stuff. Don't worry.
And if we're going to talk about it, not that it's not a great word, but again, you're going to stop your reader with trying to figure out what that word is. So it's something to think about if you want to take those kind of risks. I'm not saying this person shouldn't. I'm not saying it's not working. I'm just saying that when we sort of make up words in our poems, sometimes they're very successful and sometimes they're not, and they can pull the reader out. And that is just a blanket discussion, not this word is wrong.
Right. Yeah. And see, and I saw it immediately. Like I saw it in my head, like really vividly, because Tom said it. It's that painting of Napoleon with his hand in his jacket. So he's strolling around, and it was perfect to me. But I'm glad I didn't have to read it out loud on the fly.
Right.
I was more worried about the verse. They say normal. You know which one I'm talking about? All of that verse.
Non-monocled.
Non-monocled orb. Like
askance, top hat askew.
Yes.
There is some confusion there because the orb could be the sun, but we're also looking at this person traipsing around in a monocle. I see that on the fox as well. So then I do get confused, Manuel.
Yeah, for me it was. I'm also always too self-aware of my accent, knowing that this is my second language. So when I stumble across these kinds of words, and I was very afraid of having to read this poem out loud on the first glance. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, you're doing fantastic, because there's absolutely no way I could do what you're doing in Spanish or any language. So you're doing amazing.
I always love to hear you read. You're a great reader.
I also wonder if this poem, I don't know, could it end on "or did I"? Or could it be "or did I"? I rubbed my eyes ready and turned round in the yellow cab to look again. I don't know that we need the "no, I didn't," because we kind of figure that on our own. It's kind of like this is now she's telling us instead of showing us.
Maybe this makes it needlessly vague, but what if the "or did I" was moved to the end?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, the whole thing's kind of like a visual trip anyway. She's like looks to the side, and it's like a periphery glance, and you're just like seeing this scene. And you're like, am I in the wrong century? or that's what I'm getting out of it, is like, and so the whole the "or did I" here would be like, or did I turn around and look around? But it also, by having it at the end, it blankets the whole poem. That's why I'm suggesting it, but I think it could be more confusing here to immediately follow the "to look again." So maybe like after, between the "to look again" or the "or did I," you could have something to kind of connect those two. I don't know.
You actually might not even need "or did I," because again, that's a tell, not show. Because the act of rubbing the eyes and turning around to verify, did I see that or not, really is the "or did I." She's asking, or did I see it?
Yeah, it's implied.
Okay, it's my turn to make the title comment. I think I'm for a new title for this poem, and I'm mostly because when you introduce like a mystery like this into the title, I spend the whole time thinking about the want, and the wonder, and the wonders want. And I don't really, I mean, I suppose I get that there's like a sense of wonder, or there's like something that she's seeing. Like I get the time, I get why it connects, but I don't know. You had an idea. It looks like you had an idea, Kari.
I was just going to say, maybe that's where the "or did I" goes. Or did I, question mark.
Ah,
And
look
I
at
think that might be a much more interesting title.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to see that. Like if I saw that in a collection, I might skip to see what that poem was about. You know what I mean? Like if I saw that in the table of contents.
Yep.
I like that. I would definitely put a hyphen in the non-monocled, even if it's not technically right. I think because, and I'm not good at that kind of stuff. My grammar is not terribly great, but I think more space between the words, because it all runs together and it looks kind of crazy. And then you've got the askance and the askew, which I liked this whole bit. I like this sort of when you have to take your time to enunciate everything separately because it's so staccato. Like I enjoy that as an exercise, and I'll read those things out loud on purpose. But I would put like a non-monocled or the hyphen in there. And maybe and this is another comment I don't give very often, but like maybe add more alliteration, since it's kind of like dreamlike, and I think you could get a little weirder with it. Yeah.
I think so too. A little more playful with that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments for Debbie? All right. Thank you very much for sending this in, Debbie. Okay. From Johnny McIntyre, a read and discuss. Why women drink. Manuel, you get to tell us why.
Why women drink. It comes down to a question of weight, the mass of ourselves bearing repeated ups and downs. We sing the sinner's Hail Mary's hopes, eat wafers, wanting whole bodies. We pray to ascend, blame gravity and our thick with sin skin for keeping us heavy. Our shoulders pound with guilt. We are grateful for sweet glasses of liquid savior. We find the sun's blood makes us float. Yes, my Lord, yes. Weightless as clouds, light as a rib, as an apple seed, hollow of everything but the knowledge that liquids reaches down to roots, and we are gracious earth from which everything grows.
Dude, how good is the enjambment on sin skin? That's an enviable enjambment there.
I wonder if that isn't why she chose the rest of her line breaks. And I would question some of the line breaks in this poem, actually.
Okay. Where at?
Well, I think I'd like to see, and again, this is just me, but I would like to see things like bearing repeated ups and downs on one line. We sing the sinner's Hail Mary hopes, eat wafers wanting whole bodies. You know, I just think some of these are, and I can't help but wonder if that enjambment in, you know, what influenced making these very tight line breaks.
It reminded me of a Kay Ryan piece. Let me just pull up one of her poems real quick.
Yeah.
Because
And there's nothing wrong with it. I just wondered. These long, skinny poems often make me think that, you know, why did they choose this very, and I guess we're talking about, well, it starts out with weight, but I don't think that weight is the main part of this poem. So I don't know why it needs to be skinny, I guess is why I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm nervous to do heavily lineated poems like this because it feels
Mhm.
like every enjambment is another decision I have to make.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm protecting myself from having that many decisions.
Right. Although I do love the idea of it being why women drink. And again, we have no um, stanzas. And I love that. I love that this has just come pouring out, so to speak. So that might be a good reason why it's thin, because it's just pouring down the page, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't think it's intentionally skinny, but it's intentionally random and haphazard because of life getting in the way and choices.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
how
I
I
can
saw
buy
it. It's like
that.
With our
there's
bodies
like a
and
life
our
of chaos,
emotions.
and
Mm-hmm.
you're stuck in the chaos, and the chaos is like, well, I've made it to the end of today. I might as well drink. It's like,
Yes. And
Yeah.
chaos and the emotions sometimes.
Well, I thank you all for helping me think through that.
well, no, and you're not wrong. I mean, we're not necessarily right. I
No,
just,
I appreciate what you're saying,
mm-hmm.
but I just, it's just another thing to think about.
Uh-huh.
Can you
Yeah.
guys see? Can you guys see this right here? This is
Yes.
Kay Ryan. The like, I'm just gonna scroll down. Here's 16 of her poems all published for her.
Mm-hmm.
There,
Mm-hmm.
this is why I said it reminded me of her work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just heavily lineated. It reads quickly, and that's the trick to Kay Ryan's collections. Is when you read her collections, you want to read it quickly because of the lineation, but it actually forces you to slow down because she'll stick a ton of stuff in line to line, and that's what I feel like I'm doing here. Is I'm like, I get the idea, and then it asks me to reread it a second and a third time. The digestion's a
Mm-hmm.
little slower,
Mm-hmm.
maybe because the read's a little faster, or maybe I'm just making all this up. I don't know. Hopefully
No,
that made sense.
yeah, I see your point. And I'm coming to appreciate it more and more. Like you said, Jeremy, we are just seeing these for the first time. And so when I question something, again, it's because I really want to discover why I had the reaction. And the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to understand this. And I think that's what we're trying to share here today, too, is, understanding and why people do what they do and the choices we make when we're writing.
Yeah.
But I would position myself in between uh, these two opinions, because I do think that there is value in this way that the verses have been put, but I do think that some of these breaks we could polish, to say so. For example, there is one here. Blame we play to ascend, blame gravity and our thick with sin skin. I think that thick with sin skin, all of it should be one verse, and the thick with sin should be hyphenated.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
In our thick with sin skin for
Yes.
keeping us heavy.
Yes.
Because when I read that verse, it was difficult for me to continue to the next verse, because the whole idea was not encapsulated in the sound of that one verse. So in order to make those verses that are very short, each verse has to either be a full idea or throw you to the next idea in a natural flow. And sometimes I don't know. When I was reading, I didn't know if I should have the tone of a verse that was finished or have the tone of a verse that needed to continue. But this one was a very clear example to me. The thick with skin, etc.
I think that's great. Manuel, I think you have verbalized what I was struggling with beautifully.
And with your idea, that elevates the rhythm of her alliteration, by
Mhm.
having those hyphens. So that's,
Mhm.
yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Yeah, some of those visual things that you can do just by adding a hyphen or a comma, not because it makes sense or works out grammatically, but so it helps the reader when they're going through. I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of that.
It's also interesting. I think there's so few commas in this. So she really has worked hard on these line breaks, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's an implication of how hard we as a society work to be so thin all the time. You know, maybe that's, you know, this is a found poem in that respect. I don't know.
Sandra, can you define
Um,
found poem for me? Because I have a whole different definition for that than what I think you're saying, and I think our audience would love to hear about it.
Poem is also concrete. It's the shape of the poem. So,
Okay.
you know, this is obviously a very thinly shaped poem.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your definition?
Oh, it's one that you actually find that you use excerpts from other people's work or from a book or from a newspaper or magazine.
Well, that is another type of found poetry, but a concrete poem is also another type of concrete poem. It's also called found poetry as well.
Well, I have learned something today. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I agree. My first thought was that she was talking about weight and trying to make it skinny, but I think this poem is about a whole lot more than that.
Agree with you. I think it is as well, but I'm just wondering if that was one of her reasons
Mhm.
for keeping it the shape. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I went there at first too.
I don't want to interrupt the discussion too much, but Manuel does have to go a little bit early. So I wanted to give him a chance to say bye and peace out.
Yes, I was just writing in the chat. Thank you for letting me be part of this. I have to leave 20 minutes before we finish, but thank you so much. It was great working with all of you.
It was wonderful
Good to
hearing you,
see
Manuel.
you.
Great to see you.
Wonderful to be
Thank
with you,
you.
an honor.
Um, okay, so yeah, I didn't, sorry, go on with what you guys were saying. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I actually think I was done. I want to make it very clear. I think this is an amazing poem. I want Johnny to know that I appreciate it so very much. There's so much here. It's to use Sandra's favorite word now. It's so thick with thought and so many truths. And I really appreciate the poem. And probably the only reason I latched on to the shape of it was because the poem itself is so rich and wonderful that's really, I guess, all of it I could pick at.
That's a great problem to have. Your poetry's so wonderful that I'm going to nitpick some. Okay, so this is for discussion from Kip Knott. Johnny, thank you again. Thank you for sending it in. Johnny, as everybody knows, is awesome. This is Dylan and Cash sing "Girl from the North Country," and I'm going to skip around because I went twice last time, so I'm going to pass this to Sandra. Do you want me to
First,
go?
I have to unmute myself. I apologize. Dylan and Cash sing "Girl from the North Country." If I had been riding a train through Nashville that day, I would have begged the engineer to hush the profane chatter of cluttering steel wheels so everyone could hear Bob's country nasal twang as it rang out through the windows of the Ryman Auditorium like rain hammering a tin roof in sunshine. One verse in, Johnny's booming voice blew through the lyrics like a dust devil roaring over hard scrabble, a wind strong enough to knock down the walls that separated Americans from Americans. And when their voices sang together, they echoed a growing thunder. not the deafening, bone-rattling thunderclap of Apollo 11 that shook the world little more than 1 month later, but the burning summer thunder that rumbled down the back of my father's throat at the end of another long day of carpet bombings, lottery drawings, casualty lists, and bloody protests on TV when one shot of whiskey turned into 2 or 3.
Wow. There's a lot to love here.
This is clever. The separated Americans from Americans, the only stanza break in the whole poem,
Yep.
leaves that line in half, which I think is pretty cool.
And this is a song, this is a poem about songs, you know, the girl from the North Country, and we've got twang as it rang and booming voice blue and all this alliteration and sound work, you know, that helps us with that to shush or hush the clattering steel wheels so that you could hear. And this is only if he had been riding the train through Nashville. But unfortunately, he wasn't, you know, but still, that's where he went. That's where he went.
Yeah. No, it's a cool thing. And I'm not familiar with Johnny Cash or country music in general. So I feel like I know it's never quite been my thing. And so I feel like I'm missing something. So like before I say anything, I just want to say like I already feel like I appreciated this poem for the music that it made. And I think if you asked me, is this after a song, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like without knowing it was about Johnny Cash.
Well, and remember, it's 1969 and it's the Vietnam War.
Yeah, that's true.
It separated Americans from Americans. Carpet bombings, lottery drawings, casualty lists, and bloody protests on TV when one shot of whiskey turned into 2 or 3. This is not lottery drawings at the gas station. This is actual bombings, and people may forget that during Vietnam there was a draft.
I was gonna say I thought it referred to the draft.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So does that help you any if you look at the date and know and then remember?
Oh yeah. No, I
Yeah.
understand the time period, and like I'm with it generationally.
Okay.
I more felt like maybe there was a song or something that I didn't know about that it was maybe modeled after, or there was like it echoed or paralleled it in some way. And so that's like my first thought, but then I don't know if it does. And I was like trying to sneakily look up lyrics while you were talking, see if like maybe there was something in there that I don't know. None of this is helpful for the writers, so I'm going to stop talking now. But it's cool. It's cool how it builds, and it's cool how it falls apart, and because it gets more and more intense as it goes on. And these are all, like as you pointed out, Kari, these are all massive happenings on their own, and they each only get a half line, and then it just ends with the guy drinking more.
I apologize that I did not read. As I read this, I should have read the Johnny Cash Show, June 7th, 1969, and I did not do that. This entire poem is so perfectly enjammed, and the assonance in this poem, oh my gosh, just throughout, chatter, clattering, the steel wheels, the summer thunder rumbled. I mean, it's all throughout. It's the language is just gorgeous, and of course the imagery, and it's so tightly, precisely done. It's absolutely. I just feel it's perfect.
And there is so much going on in this poem because there's the camaraderie of Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash, which some of the folks who are here today are making comment about, and that's so very true. We've got a very deep country western singer who's collaborating with a folk singer, a very famous folk singer, and that Cash invites him on his show. And Tom Barlow brought up a wonderful thought that, this is kind of like the two opposite sides of the war as well, these two singers from different places. And this is about the dad, because if the writer had been riding the train through Nashville, and he's imagining what it must have been like, and this is about his father having served. Because for his dad, it's all carpet bombing, lottery drawings, casualty lists.
Yeah.
This is such a powerful poem, and part of it is being from that era, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's so much emotion in this, and yet it is so subtle, and which is what makes it. And in the second stanza, the enjambed line halfway through, but the burning summer thunder that rumbled down, just brilliant, the back of my father's throat at the end of another long day of carpet bombings, lottery drawings. Oh my gosh. And then, just the seemingly effortless, but again, we know the sweat involved in writing this, the syllables, the deft choice of the marriage of the syllables used in each lines. If you even just count his syllables from line to line, it's just such a beautiful symphony. It's incredible.
I'm really sad Manuel had to go right before this poem because he's such an auditory poet. I think he would have really enjoyed this.
Yeah, the sounds are so lush.
Yeah.
And this poem really just lays me out. It lays me out because you have to remember the writer was not alive at the time that all of this was happening. And the fact that the song is Girl from the North Country really has nothing to do with the politics. It's just that this is all the stuff that was happening at this time. And meanwhile, over here, and that's how it is with war, people here don't experience it unless they have a loved one in the military and can kind of know what's going on. Even though it's on the television, we harden ourselves to it, So this is a beautiful poem in honor of his father and in honor of all who served and died. And meanwhile, this is what our country was doing, Johnny Cash was singing with Bob Dylan, and they're at the Ryman, and there's sunshine. And guess what? In Vietnam, this is what was happening. And also in the middle of all of that, Apollo 11, right?
Yeah.
It's just
and
gorgeous.
A perfect example of how something so enmeshed in the specific gives us the universal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always think of poems like this as like a constellation. We have like those listicle poems, and they're like, these are things. Like, this is what's all the stuff in my shed, and then they just list all the stuff in their shed. And I like those because to me, it's kind of like a constellation. They give me a bunch of points in the sky, and I get to draw the lines where I want. And, you can draw something that's heartfelt or sentimental or negative or violent or whatever. But I think other people could look at this and be nostalgic. Other people could look at this and feel like the rabble's being roused, and they're like, well, I should do, they might see it as a call to action, because it does end with the speaker or the speaker's father having, being defeated by the chaos. Even though this is supposed to be a symbolic merger, not just with the duet, but the sound connecting people and like cutting through all those other noises however
Yeah.
briefly the cut was.
And all these things last forever, really,
Yeah.
until someone dies and forgets, you know.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say the speaker there, the writer wasn't alive. The writer may have been alive, but certainly not an adult. Couldn't have been riding the train, more than likely, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
All about imagining how it was.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Oh, thank you, Kip.
Yes, thank you very much. Bonnie said, I wonder whether any musician today is crossing that divide with another musician that represents in such an opposite political camp, like letting the music do the work and just let it stand on its own.
That's beautifully
Oh,
said as
thank
well.
you. Yes.
Yeah. We have time for, well, we sort of have time. Round out an even dozen.
Sure.
One more. Kip, thank you. No, you wrote a great poem. It was wonderful to read. All right, so our last poem today, we do an even dozen. This is Beth Mulcahy. Sorry, I'm words are starting to run together for me, like sliding out of focus. I need to get out of my chair. So she said, I would love for my poem to be read and discussed. And Kari, would you like to read the last one?
I will, and it's segueing from our last poem. This is interesting. Combat boots, too. My daughter scrubs dried mud from the soles of her combat boots, fashion boots for 7th grade, with the buckles and the laces and the hooks, and I ask her, how did they get so muddy? Oh, she tells me, I had to stand outside in mud during the active shooter drill at school. I don't respond because I don't know what to say. You know, she says, we had a drill because of what happened at the school in Michigan this week. I let out a breath I'm holding and say, I'm so sorry that you had to do that. It's no big deal, she reassures me in her cheerful way. It was only for 10 minutes. I nod and think, but I don't mean the mud. I mean the drill. I mean, you're just a kid, my kid, and it is a big deal that you could be shot in school, and we just live with that reality. I mean, I'm sorry it's such a mess. Let me clean them for you. Boots can be scrubbed clean, but some messes feel too big. I'm just another mother, that's all. Cleaning mud off boots. Just another mother who doesn't want her kids shot in school. What can I do? These boots aren't actually meant for combat.
I almost want to take a moment of silence. We talked about heavy lineation already today. I think this is just excellent. I think it's excellent. I'm also not I'm not like a huge fan of italicizing or bolding stuff in the middle of a poem. I feel like it's more useful to say it in a way that impacts the reader. That doesn't mean it's without merit, or I don't think it ever doesn't have a place. But the I think that's a great italics, because it's
Off my mic instead of turning it on. I think in this case, the italic kind of helps us understand that that's inside thought for the mother. So I never use quotation marks, but I wonder if it would help if things they say out loud were in quotation marks and the italics were used for internal thought, or I don't know, to help people get through the poem. Although I seem to not have any stumbling. I don't think I understood as I read what was happening, whether the daughter was talking or the mother was talking. But I do think maybe in this poem, some italics are necessary to help sort that all out.
Yeah, and I'm okay with it here. I was going to recommend maybe even moving, because this part is cool. I like the indentation on not knowing what to say. Because I feel like this line being isolated is exactly how I felt by the end of this poem. I did
Yep,
not know what to say. I still don't really. I think I'm just hedging. I'm just trying to buy time.
agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
so maybe taking like the other stuff that the speaker says and moving that over as well. Um, I don't know, but I think the my having that italicized is, it pivots it for me from statistic to personal tragedy, because I think that's like, I have kids in their school age right now, elementary and middle school, and there was a certain point where I stopped hearing background noise, which it's sad that it ever hit that point in the first place. To now I have like legitimate fear. Like there are certain days I send my kids to school and I'm just scared. Like I just drop them off. This my is where I I feel like I go from like, oh, it's a thing that could happen. It's just a thing that happens to, it could like legitimately happen to people I know or my own kids.
Well, this hits me hard because I just finished a poem and it's just been recently published about my granddaughter sharing with me that they practice active shooter drills. And as with this poet, the kids have found a way to compartmentalize this. And they're just as terrified as we are, but they got to go to school every day. And it's not unlike a soldier who gets up every morning, puts on his boots and goes on mission. I mean, we are living in a war zone, like Tom said in the very first poem. Who says school's not a war zone?
Yeah.
And it's there's something beautiful about the way we've come back around to that poem as well with that particular line. But this poem so beautifully, I mean, it's hard to pick anything apart here because it's just so deeply honest, and it almost feels like everything here is necessary. And maybe your thoughts about italics and indenting a few lines, but I also don't want to lose the flow or bring the fact that that one line is indented is so important because it's really the thesis of the poem, as you say.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do. We're trying to protest. We're trying to to beat on our legislators' doors, and nothing is working, and our children are dying, and we all just feel so helpless. And how can that be in this country? You know, this
Right.
poem is so rich and has hit us all so hard. I was in tears at the end of it. You all caught that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the child is saying, it was only for 10 minutes.
Right.
She reassures me in her cheerful way. It was only for 10 minutes.
That's the thing, right? Like that's another line that stood out to me, because there's so many things, there's so many ways your life can be destroyed in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's the drill, but it's not describing an actual shooting, but it's still like we do them for, I teach at Notre Dame College, and they have drills, they have drill training. You have to, like, there's videos you're supposed to watch and go through that, and it's like a 2 hour video. It's a 2 hour video on like keeping your door locked and turn the lights off. Like it's I don't know. I agree. Like I don't think there's much to change, and I think that the things that she does put in, because like there's a lot of conversation, and I like conversational poems when they're done well. You know, like but this the some messes feel too big. That's the part where like I started feeling it in my throat, because it's it's that thing where you're just doing the tiny little tasks because you can't face everything else, you know. And how tragic would it be to clean out those shoes?
Yeah.
Tom said that there was a line that seemed unclear to him, and then I missed it. What was that line, Tom?
Without a key to change in narrator. He said that there's a point where it goes from the speaker to the other character.
And that's when I said maybe one person is in italics and the other person is in quote marks.
That would, yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, to differentiate the two voices.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the child doesn't even need italics or quote, because it says, you know, she says, she tells me I had to stand outside in mud during active shooter drill at school. So that doesn't necessarily need to be italicized because it says she tells me. And again, it says, you know, she says, we had a drill because of what happened at school in Michigan this week. Again, it says she says. So you might be able to get away without italicizing the child at all and only the mother.
Yeah, I think so.
That would help a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That would help a great deal. And most of the poem is the conversation anyway, so I don't think you know you'd lose anything.
Yeah, I really applaud this poem. It's beautiful. We've had these poems today have just been gorgeous and wonderful. There's been a richness to every single poem.
So much variety too. Like we've had just an insane amount of stuff. We only did 12 poems. I don't know why I tried to get so many. I don't know how many more poems. I feel bad because now it's like, well, crap, now people are going to want their stuff done and we didn't get to it. But at least there's the anthology. That's why the anthology.
Yes.
Oh man, thank you, Sandra and Kari. I mean, we've got a few people left. Round of applause for the people here. Done a phenomenal job. This will be recorded. Well, no, obviously you know that. We're gonna take the recording. We're gonna put it online, and then we'll be pestering people for the next week or so to donate to the OPA. If you enjoyed what you saw here today, if you like the OPA, share it. Send it to people you know. Post it on Facebook. I'll link the people that I'm going to send out an email to everybody who submitted. And within the next week, I'll send out the anthology. People can look at it and give me things they want to fix. If your poem was read today and you want to fix stuff before the anthology, you have plenty of time. I'm going to give everybody time to do that. Thank you, everyone, for today. Thank you for appreciating poetry and listening to us. And yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you for all these beautiful poems, everybody.
Thank you. And I thank you for the discussion. I learned so much from all of you that I worked with. Thank you.
How awesome if we could do this with every book of poetry we read. We sat down and just got to read it with half dozen other people.
Thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely, and thanks very sincerely. Thank you to you both for giving me your time and the time to do. It's, I mean,
such an honor.
You guys did this out of the goodness of your hearts. It's really means a lot, and I had a great deal of fun. So
it was fun.
Me too. It was an honor.
Thank you so much.
And thanks so much for all that you do at OPA. Everyone, you, Johnny, Chuck, Ricky, Suzanne, I'm missing people. Johnny, I might have said her already. There's just so many. Tom, of course, Tom.
Karen.
Yeah, and Chris, everybody.
Yep.
You know, and you all are doing it out of the goodness of your heart. And I sometimes think people don't realize you're not being paid for that. This is all service that you provide to your community. And I appreciate that so much. And I value the OPA so highly. Truly do. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.